with Freedom Project Washington. And I am blessed to be in a space with two queens, Miss Andrea Altheimer with the Community Passageways, as well as Miss Carolyn Presnell with Weld and Weld Seattle. So I would definitely like to begin this session by giving space to just kind of giving a little background here and allowing Miss Altheimer to pretty much bless us with just giving us a little bit of her autobiography and telling us a little bit about herself.
Thank you, Franklin. Good afternoon. My name is Andrea Altheimer. I work with Community Passageways as the Director of Reentry. Reentry is very important for me because I once was formerly incarcerated. I am formerly incarcerated, not once was, sorry about that. I spent almost 21 years at Washington Correctional Center for Women, and I watched a lot of my friends come in and out and use that place as a revolving door. And I wanted to understand what was lacking in the community where they continued to visit that place, and it was resources and community connection. That has driven my passion to help individuals that are reintegrating back into the community to make sure that they have those resources, make sure that they have the connections that they need so that they feel like they belong out here in the community, because that is important. Walking around aimlessly and not feeling like you have a sense of belonging can trigger something on the inside of you that could ultimately perpetuate life of crime or visiting those spaces. But once individuals realize that they do belong and people offer space to them and then walk them through the process as well as give them the resources to thrive in this community, it has rendered successful, especially with the program that we're doing at Community Passageways and our partners and those that are participating. So I just thank you for being in space with you all today.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you for that. Thank you for the work in the community and all that you do. We're also blessed with Ms. Carolyn Presnell, who is a native of the city of Seattle, program director of Weld Seattle's 1426 project, as well as the co-president of the IF project. And without me just kind of messing up that beautiful background that she has, I would like for her to do the same thing and just give us a little bit of her own personal bio from her perspective.
Yeah, you betcha. Thank you, Franklin. It's good to be in space with everyone. My name is Carolyn Presnell, and I am the program director for 1426, which is kind of a subsidiary of Weld Seattle. And what we do is transitional housing and employment for folks who are impacted by the criminal legal system, and oftentimes, kind of surviving chronic drug and alcohol use. So we're kind of second tier of cares that once people have made a decision that they want to be sober and they're tired of recidivism and all of the things that attend it, and they are looking to change the trajectory of their path, we step in to support people in that place with a variety of wraparound services, as well as housing and employment supports. And then also, yeah, Franklin, I also get to sit on the board of directors for the IF project, which was one of the organizations that really created a turning point for me in my last trip to the penitentiary, is that they had come in and shown the IF documentary. And if someone could have said or done something that would change the trajectory of your life, like what would that be to change your story? And I had such a deep relationship with that question that it was something that had already prompted some stuff that in me about wanting to change the direction of my life. I have a 30-year history with the Department of Corrections on the wrong side of the law. And I wanted my life to have, I wanted a different path for me, not exclusively for myself, because I walked into the penitentiary the last time at 45. So it felt like, some of my best years were behind me, but I had children on this planet. And I wanted something different for my family. And so, reentry is wildly important to me because I am the people that we serve. And so it feels powerful to be in a position where I can advocate for change for a community of people that I adore. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you both for sharing that. And, that's for me, I guess that's the privilege and the pleasure of being in the space with these two queens, is the fact that we all represent the change that we would like to see in other people. when it comes down to going through the system and being an individual of lived experience. Individuals come at this approach from many different positions, and we can look blame and we can look fault, or we can take the bull by the horn and start to navigating the system and create the change, that opportunities that we wish other people will be able to have, those that we didn't have ourselves. And doing this work, we find that a lot of the barriers and a lot of the challenges are out there, takes individuals like ourselves, navigators who are compassionate about doing the work. Being an individual myself, who got over 20 years of experience going in and out of the Department of Corrections. And one of the biggest hardships, and that's a good topic of this conversation, that we found coming out is housing and the inability of effective, supportive, safe, and secure housing to assist individuals in making that transition from institutional mindset, institutional living, towards what we would call quasi-quality living and or home ownership. So it's going to be a pleasure for me to sit down in this conversation with both these ladies, talking about the work that they do, the work that we do at Freedom Project, with not only preparing people for that transition into that next phase of their life, but always representing that example of what that can look like, or being the physical example of what that looks like, for not only the individuals that are in our immediate biological family, but our community circle as well. So with that, I would like to open this up, kind of for discussion, and look at, I know that the project was gracious enough to hit me with some questions. So I would like to open it up with some of the questions, and I'll basically ask you both just to share some of your input and insight on the questions. Question number one, what do you wish people knew about the housing challenges facing individuals when they're leaving jail and prison? And what do you wish you knew then that you know now that could have helped your path coming out? Let's start with Andrea.
Well, when I thought about this question, I'm looking at the challenges that those, and especially those of color, Black and brown, coming home, is that resources, money, right? A lot of people have spent an amount of time incarcerated, and they just do not have money to come out and rent places, as well as there's a shortage of landlords that will rent to felons. Right. And so if people, they don't have the rental history, they don't have the credit score, and they don't have the resources, it's difficult for them to find on their own a place to rent or to stay, to lay their heads at night. It's so important that we partner with individuals like Weld, that houses, that has these, that lowers the barriers, right? They don't judge people because of their criminal records, and they also give them resources while they're there being housed with employment. But the biggest thing is individuals coming out, credit hasn't been a big factor. Like a lot of people, they don't have credit cards. Well, you definitely don't have credit cards on the inside, so you're not building your credit. I came home with a 0 credit score. And so I had to start from 0. I mean, not even bad, but zero credit is bad credit in the eyes of lenders, right? Or those that are going to rent to you. So if you don't have a transitional house to go to, you don't, and if you don't have a voucher or someone that is going to take care of that rent, you know, even at the transitional house, you could find yourself homeless or couch surfing. If you don't have a job or employment upon your release, and even if you do, I'm going to go back and forth with that. Even if you do, it's going to take a couple of months before you can save enough money to rent your own place. So I see the biggest thing is resources. Financial literacy is very important. People need to know how to manage their money once they get a little money, but having that grace period to where one could go and kind of catch up with life, if you will, you know, and landlords, more landlords that are willing to open up the door and give second chances. Those are the barriers that I'm finding with individuals that I'm working with.
Thank you for that one. Thank you for that one. And I mean, we know as being people of lived experience, the fact that there's 2 types of individuals that walk out, that re-enter the community. Those people who have support and those people who don't have support. Both of them will experience that end result when it comes to challenges of finding long-term permanent housing. But for the ones who don't have support coming out, that's the bigger challenge, because those are the ones that we find that will venture through those different types of transitional living environments. And if we have those that are truly structured and supportive, that have the resources on the inside, as you pointed out, then we see success. Or if we have those that are more like warehousing, just individuals in the community because people are looking out for income and trying to buy property, then we have failure because we don't have the support that individuals need in the community to be able not only to just get a hand up, to be able to sustain themselves where they're at. So I know that the position that you put down is one that is being experienced by a lot of brothers and sisters today. And that is the reason why we need this initiative and others similar that talks about how do we get quality, affordable housing for individuals that are out here on this trail of transition. But Sister Carolyn, how do these questions impact you, and how would you respond to question number one?
Yeah, Andrea did a beautiful job of laying that out. I mean, and I think there's so many challenges that folks face when they are leaving jail or prison, or just about being armed with information around what it looks like to get home. Like a lack of stable housing delays people's approval for like discretionary releases. So like folks who don't have a stable or supportive, address, a place to live, they tend to do more time. And it's one of the considerations that is not really made when we're looking at affordable housing. And I mean, I can move into some places around public safety and those kinds of things. But, also like what Andrea was talking about is that most people that leave prison, they leave with limited finances. So it is difficult, if not impossible, to secure housing, and strict housing policies make it even harder for people who have criminal histories to even be considered as viable candidates for housing. And then even, when we do come home, is that we have this absence of affordable housing. And with that lack, it leaves formerly incarcerated folks competing for the same limited resources with other people who have no criminal history at all. And when you are homeless or unstably housed, or you're living in a high crime neighborhood because like that's where you come from, and so that's where you return to, all that stuff elevates an individual's risk of reoffending and going back to an institution. So like those are the challenges that I think about primarily.
Exactly. Thank you for that. I mean, thank you both for sharing some definite informative insights, not only for ourselves, but for those people that are in the space to be able to understand, just really getting just kind of a snapshot of some of the difficulties that individuals that are returning from life of institutional living, be it mental health hospitals, be it prison systems, community jails. I mean, people talk about the hardships of people coming out of prison, but they don't really look at the difficulties of people who are down here on the ground, and those people coming out of that rapid return process that we call city and county jails, that are still struggling with whatever situation they may have been going through prior to their short-term confinement, and that's still leading and playing a part to the instability that they're experiencing when they're released from that environment back into the community. So having housing structures set up as pathways on into permanent and affordable housing, permanent opportunities, is definitely one that we need to invest more time, conversation, and money into. Because when we talk about affordable housing, to me personally, that's kind of a misnomer, because what's affordable to one population is not affordable to another. And with the work that we do here at Freedom Project, with moving people from transitional housing into permanent, partnering with Housing Connector and creating our own partnerships with permanent housing, we come to understand that just because a place has a tag saying affordable, it's not necessarily the margin rate of the population that we are serving. So a $1,000 or $1,400 studio apartment in downtown Seattle is not affordable. I don't care what is under. It's still not affordable when you look at what the cost of living is for the city of Seattle and King County in general. So we have to look at how do we create a more marginalized system of thought to where when we're talking about housing individuals, we're able to look at not only income, but we're able to look at long-term longevity for housing. And we're able to look at the market and be able to perceive, is this person going to be able to have a successful retention rate? Or is this person going to be struggling after the first, second, or third month in the housing because of the simple fact of their need for housing and not their ability to be able to afford the housing that's available on the market? So, I mean, question number two that we look at really just kind of hits me where it hurts. And with all of us being descendants of that great, beautiful people, African-American culture, what do the legacy and current manifestation of Blackness in housing, how has that affected the market? And has that affected you individually when it came to trying to find permanent housing or assisting the people that you serve with finding housing? Do we still see that there is a cultural divide in housing when it comes to serving people of color? One of you can go first, or we went with Andrea for, I see you hit your button first.
Bring it, Andrea, bring it.
You got excited on that one.
I'm coming too, boo.
So when I was looking at that question, I was thinking about gentrification, right? And how Seattle used to have a lot of affordable places. We had Rainier Vista, we had Holly Park, we had the other one, you know what I mean? Yeso Terrace, and Seattle was just affordable. Since gentrification happened, they have pushed people out to where Seattle is no longer affordable, but Seattle has banned the box, right? Federal Way, Auburn, Kent, Des Moines, Tacoma. We have clients that are pushed out that way and they don't have band the box. And so they're having issues with finding places, affordable places. So even I believe that the Black community has been pushed out of our communities, right? Right here in Seattle, the South End, the Central area, and all these, greater areas in which we knew and which we grew up in that we can't afford to live any longer. I was at an apartment complex last night in Federal Way, and though they're pushing us south, it's starting to look like someone said Nino Brown's complex, right? And that's where there's lots of violence. It's the grounds, the garbage was spilling over, and it's like they're just not keeping up properties where we are being housed as they would in South Seattle today. It hasn't affected me because I was lucky and was able to rent my house from family members. So I haven't faced that challenge, but that is not the case for a lot of my people that are coming home. I have one girl, she has filled out 10 applications here in Seattle. We're banned the box, paying for the screening and denied, because of whatever reasons that they're saying. Lots of times they're saying, oh yes, we're interested. They're gonna show her the apartment. They are ready to take her deposit and then deny her. And I know that it is because of her criminal record, even though we have banned the box, and the color of her skin does not help.
Thank you for that. Thank you very much. Carolyn, would you like to chime in?
I would. I would. I mean, all that, like, I understand that this is not a, well, I don't understand that this is not a political conversation. From slavery to segregation, people of color have been systematically denied rights and socioeconomic opportunity. Like, the disproportionality in homelessness is, we all know, a byproduct of systemic inequity, and the effects of racism continue to perpetuate the same disparities in all of the critical areas that impact homelessness. I mean, we've got poverty, we got incarceration, we got access to quality healthcare, we got segregation and rental housing discrimination. Sister was talking about, redlining. We have all of that has made it historically really difficult for, if not impossible, for people of color to have access to housing, to shelter, which is a basic essential need. And I am not, I have shared that I had been incarcerated for many years, over decades. So I've gone through many iterations of what it looks like to re-enter community, looking for safe and secure shelter from leaving an institution. I started doing that stuff back in the 80s. And the last time I walked out of a penitentiary was in 2017. And so like that, and it had almost not changed at all, other than like, I mean, I didn't get any doors slammed in my face, but even what Andrea was talking about is the ban the box, is that like ban the box doesn't block people from looking to see who you are. And so they can still tell you no, even though we have this thing in place. And it was that like, I came from an institution and I had to steel myself up to tell my story every time I went to go rent someplace to live, only to be denied and to try to find the same enthusiasm to come and do it again. And I had a better shot of having access to it, and we're talking about really limited housing because I have really limited resources. As you come out of the gate, if you're lucky, you got a voucher from DOC that'll pay the place, but they're going to approve wherever it is that you move. So you land where you land. And I think about, in the attempts that I made to go outside of the Seattle city limits, because I wanted to move myself out of the neighborhoods and places where I had been engaged in chronic active drug addiction and criminal behavior. Like I wanted to move myself someplace out of the systems where like I knew all the people and begin to start again. And that was never an opportunity for me. So I learned how to, develop the skills and the fortitude and all the things that it took, which I'm grateful for in this moment, but that shouldn't be the way. I shouldn't have had to fight for my ability to have a home. And it's, we hear people talk about it all the time, is that like you do your time and you pay your debt to society, but it's untrue. Is that you pay that debt to the day you die. And it is not justice. So.
Thank you very much. Thank you both for these passionate, Lord have mercy. You guys just, and I love to be in this space because, as a person who have provided both supportive housing and now work with an organization, as your organizations are one that not only supports individuals who have lived experience and those people that are formerly justice involved, but you're actually putting people in a position where they can actually not only realize being able to afford market value rate housing, because if you're not market value, then you're really struggling. With the affordable, because there's a bigger demand than there is a supply. And you can't build them fast enough. As fast as an affordable housing complex is open, one just opened last week, it's already full. So the list of individuals that are going into these units are just enormous. And being able to move people through this system is one of the reasons why we at Freedom Project went into with Movement Mortgage to start looking at how can we really educate people on first-time home buyership? What does home ownership look like? Taking an individual while they're in a supportive housing complex or in a supportive housing program and start to have that conversation with them, because once they get their credit in place, once they start getting themselves in position, then they can start having a conversation about buying a condo or buying a home and understanding what that looks like and being the foundation of generational wealth. So I know that's one of the things that we've been doing here, just with a little podcast that we call First Time Home Buyers Power Hour, which is an informational session to just get people to start thinking about what does that look like, because we understand the hurdles and the hoops, especially for individuals of color, to be able to rent. And there are some areas, as we're talking about gentrification, and that's moving people out south and moving them out east, we're still having to deal with the color issue. And you can come in with an excellent background, you can come in with an excellent application, and all of a sudden you're being denied. And they're saying it's not because you're Black, which kind of leads us into our next question, which is surveillance when it comes to living in affordable housing and housing complexes. How does that differ from the suburban areas that people live in? In your experience, is the surveillance in public housing complexes, or are they over policed? Do we see that in the neighborhoods. And even in Seattle, that is becoming predominantly more Euro-American than it is back when it was the old CD and it was all African-American. I mean, do we see that that is still being policed on the same level that it was when it was all Black? Or when we start looking at Renton, Kent, Auburn, do we see a more concentrated presence, police presence in those areas now that they're becoming more predominantly people of color, a BIPOC community than they were in the past? Would somebody like to help me on that question?
I mean, truth is that like, I'm not like I used to be, but we're working with people who are coming dominantly from these areas. Like, what I do know is that, like, you know, the policies within the like Department of Housing and Urban Development are structured in such a way that it like fuels the, you know, the criminalization of low income individuals and communities, and specifically those that have criminal records. And as a result of that, anything that is dictated to be a high crime area means that there is no reasonable expectation of privacy, like in any place that's considered a common area. And that means inevitably that folks are getting arrested, like they're arresting people in that area because it's considered high crime. And then folks have like no access to their Fourth Amendment rights, which is, you know, like this reason, what am I trying to say? Like unreasonable search and seizure is that like they have access to come in and dictate whether or not it's a crime area. And by surveillance and all of that is that like your personal and privacy rights are denied you as a result of essentially of poverty. Is that, and there's no question that as a result of access to resources is that Black people are marginalized, people of color are marginalized. And so they end up in places that are higher crime rates and unjust system. So, I mean, that's my viewpoint. I want to hear what Andrea has to say.
You said a lot, and it's so true right
Yeah.
there. The only thing that I would add to that is how DOC shows up in these places. Now, DOC, with a couple of my clients, DOC has come in with their full vest, like the jump out unit, where there are 4 DOC officers coming to your house just to check and say hello and do a quick walkthrough and leave. And the message that is sending is that you are a troublemaker, right? When they're coming to your property, everybody's outside, the managers see them come. You could come a little more discreet and not police in that way, right? And so just to come in with their vest, go to your apartment. I've had clients who were at work and they come home and their neighbors are telling them that the police or DOC has showed up 4 or 5 deep to their apartments looking for them. And with that messaging, it looks like you have committed a crime or you have done something wrong, that this isn't just a monthly check-in, right? And it just creates a narrative for whoever wants to spin it. And then if you think about property managers, they don't want that type of attention in their complexes because everyone there isn't system involved or on paper. And so they don't want people to think that this is that type of environment when they're renting. So that type of policing, I think that the messaging that they're sending is doing more harm than good with individuals. And then I will rest with everything else that Carolyn said.
Yeah, that was well said.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. And then, I mean, and the one thing that really that when it comes to, it's equated to Blackness, but it's a stigma that falls under low income and subsidized housing and individuals who have vouchers. And as you're starting to move outside of the city and you're looking at some of these other apartment complexes, and it equates the question as to why are the rents so high? And a lot of them are priced out of the range of the vouchers, because this is one way that they can say, we don't want you here. That's the old NIMBY law, not in my backyard. We don't want this kind of people here, so we're going to raise the rents up this high so that the housing vouchers won't be able to touch them. So that's another form of policing and surveillance to deny individuals equal access to having what is a necessity and an adequate place to live, just because of the simple fact that they are on some type of entitlement program or subsidy program. But the next question, one that I find that the way that it's framed, really dealing with how is this fight for people of incarceration that's coming out of incarceration. I think this is more of a question, how do we deal with the fear that people have of these different populations? When we look at how does racism, ableism, transphobia, and all the other isms that constitutes the other population play a part in housing with people that have a background in incarceration? And for me personally, I've seen this play out not just for people that are formerly justice involved, but I see it play out for people that are just members of those populations, where we have individuals like the same thing, NIMBY, not in my backyard. And that's fine. You can do what you want to, how you want to, when you want to, just not here. So they start to create these barriers. Have you guys seen any of that play out with the people that you work with?
Yeah, absolutely. Because what it is oppression, and it's oppression in the form of intentional or individual bias, constitutes discrimination, sometimes and oftentimes violence. And these systems they're administered in ways that like under distribute essential life opportunities. We're talking about income and healthcare and education and housing. And they target certain populations with policing and with imprisonment.
Exactly, Andrea.
I don't have anything to add to that one. That was it.
Fantastic. And so I know as we're rounding it up, we talked about the term supportive housing. And for me, I do this a lot because I like to make that distinguishment. What is supportive housing? What's transitional housing? And because there are different levels. You have supportive housing, and I think we kind of touched on that a little bit. We have transitional housing, we have boarding housing, you have bed and breakfast type of housing. All these are different types of housing, group home housing, that falls under this definition of transitional supportive housing. But in the reality, they're different. And when it comes down to it, what does supportive housing look like for folks who are leaving from jail to prison that does not fall into the trap of surveillance and policing? And I don't think there's no such thing, but I'm pretty sure because that's the NIMBY law when it comes down to quote unquote, you're doing great work, but we don't want you to do it in our backyard. We don't want you to bring ex-felons into our backyard. We don't want you to bring recovering addicts into our backyard. They don't see the supportive aspect of it. They just see who you're bringing into their backyard, into their neighborhoods. So in your own words, what does that look like for folks? And when we talk about supportive housing, what does supportive housing look like? And the difference, and in my opinion, I'll give you the example. Adult care center is a form of supportive housing. So is Oxford a form of supportive housing. So is Weld a form of supportive housing. Why is one more police and surveillance than the other?
I'll jump in there. I'm gonna jump in there. You got it. You got something, Andrea? Okay. Listen, like, I mean, we know that's not rocket science. We know the difference. We know the difference is that those who have been impacted are stigmatized. And so just automatically, and it's done socially, it's done politically, it's been done historically, and it's really rooted almost in the DNA of our culture. And so we have it amongst ourselves as community of formerly incarcerated and people of color, we actually perpetuate the bias in the way that we show up. And this is one of those things for me that's like, it's farther up the fire hose. If we're talking about like supportive housing and we're talking about it specifically for people who are leaving prison or jail, then what we are talking about is an exercise that happens long before you leave the gate. And, you know, we need comprehensive assessments in order to identify like service provision for and housing needs and link people with the appropriate level of service to need long before they leave the institution. And we're talking about allowing for the development of skills and tools to deal with trauma and racism and chronic incarceration, substance abuse, mental health issues, separation from family. You know, we know that like somewhere around 80% of folks who are impacted by incarceration are parents, but we also know a cop car, no one ever asks you if there's children coming home, and how family, caregivers, kin givers, all of that stuff is that like, this is such a complex issue that is far beyond housing, is that like supporting all of the need for reparation of system impact has to happen before you can get a house, because we're talking about getting a house, but getting a house don't mean keeping a house. And then, you know, having like supports in place, like transitional and supportive housing, and do you need to do one before you do the other? And having these considerations is that like, you know, you can do housing for an individual, but it's real hard to find housing for a family, or hard to find housing for partners. And just like you had pointed out, Franklin, is that affordable housing is its own misnomer, is like affordable to who? And so anyway, that's my contribution to that.
So the word supportive in itself, it rings a bell for me, right? It has to be more than, it's everything what Carolyn said about all the needs that come with the person who is returning home. But supportive means that I'm going to take the time and help walk you through these needs. I'm not going to just give you your lease, have you sign it, hand you over some keys, and bye-bye, pay my rent on the 1st of the month. If you're here after the 5th of the month, then you're late. Right? And then you could possibly be evicted. No, I'm gonna make sure that I assess the needs. The needs should already been assessed prior to a person going to transitional housing or support.
We lost you, Andrew.
Sorry about that.
There you go. I see your passion. Come on.
That the needs of individuals that are returning home. If you're in the supportive housing business or you're in the transitional housing business, then you should already know the needs of the people that are coming home. There is not a one-all fix-all, right? But then at least you should have the resources there. If this person needs mental health, this person needs food, if this person needs medical, if this person needs rental assistance, right? If this person needs an individual to kind of walk them through this process because they've never rented before, because they've lived at home or they lived on somebody else, or they were homeless prior to their incarceration, you need to understand that these individuals are not going to come into your house and already know how to live there or pay bills there, that they're going to need someone that's going to hold their hand and walk them through this process. So when you say the word supportive, it means exactly that, that you're able and willing to support a person through this transition. And I like to say what Franklin says about transitional houses, that it is exactly that. Don't get comfortable. You're supposed to be moving. You're supposed to be transitioning through
it. And you're absolutely correct. Thank you both for that. Thank you both, because at the end of the day, when we start to talk about individuals that are in transition, we want our people to be comfortable, but we don't want them to get comfortable. Because when they get comfortable, then you find people living in tiny house villages, which is a form of transitional housing. We find them living in tent cities. We find them living in transitional housing programs that they call stopgaps for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And it's not necessarily what is, because the housing program takes a responsibility, because the fact that they're feeding off these people. That's how they're paying their bills. That's how they're sustaining themselves. So they're not in the business of helping people. They're in the business of housing people. So we have to understand what the business is at the organization that is sponsoring these dwellings. Are they in the transitional housing? Are they in the supportive housing? Because supportive housing will have a supportive staff. They will have resources. They will have things inside of that facility or that location that helps individuals put themselves in the position to move from one stage to another. The problem when we start talking about individuals, and Carolyn pointed out a good point, is the fact that individuals that come from institutional environments have become accustomed to having somebody take care of them, because that's what those environments do. They don't have to feed themselves. They don't have to, that job is right outside the bed. You don't have to worry about paying no bills because everything is being done for them. Is that constructive towards that individual's growth and development? No, it's counterproductive. But when they come out, they still need that hand up, that helping hand, because a lot of the individuals that we're working with, that we have the pleasure of serving, they're not children. And they have had a life prior to incarceration. Now we have some, I happen to be blessed to work for an organization that 90% of our population are individuals with lived experience and formerly justice involved. And some of them went in as juveniles. So they did over 25 years, they did over 30 years. And a big part of the work that we do, that they do, is in assisting not only in working with individuals to be able to express and learn how to productively express the trauma that they're going through, but how do we keep navigating these systems, continue to move up the ladder of progress towards perfect, or towards a more perfect living situation. And here we have probably about 4 or 5 of them that own their own homes now. So this is an environment that has an excellent example, as Community Passageways, as Weld Works and Weld Seattle, have an excellent example of individuals who have transitioned on to a quality life, to where they're not living somebody else's life, or they're not effective imitations of somebody else's interpretation of reality. They actually have defined their own reality, and now they're living that lifestyle that they said they wanted to live. So bravo to both of you and the work that you do. Keep it up. I mean, there's a couple more questions, and one just deals with what support does folks need for housing? What would you say the support that folks need prior to and after we have them in housing? And we know that there's those essential needs: food, clothing, education, training, employment, transportation, communication. What are some of the other things that I didn't touch on, or how do we build off some of the stuff that I did just touch on?
Financial budgeting. Individuals need to know how to manage, sorry, my granddaughter's right here, need to know how to budget their money to pay their bills. I had a lot of bill paying is online. So if individuals are not technology fine, they don't know how to go online and pay their bills, right? You can't just go and hand your landlord today $2,200. There ain't no $500 anymore. $2,200 and crisp $100 bills. You can't do that. You have to go online and pay your rent. And oftentimes you have to have a bank account or Cash App or something to do that. But individuals who have done, I didn't know any of that stuff. I didn't have a Cash App. I had to learn these things. Someone had to teach me these things when I came home. So I think that financial literacy is very important. Teaching people how to operate this computer, how to go in and pay bills, but then also how to budget their money. Like we learned how to work that 42 cents an hour, that $55 a month, and get the basic things that we needed or wanted, right, on the inside. But we didn't have to worry about paying light bills, rent, water, sewer, garbage, or buying, major groceries or your hygiene and all that kind of stuff. The way that, and cleaning products that you have to do out here, because some of those things were given to you. So I think helping individuals with financial literacy, also an individual has to have a job. They have to have employment to be able to afford and maintain these properties. So I just think that hand holding, again, walking people through the process and supporting them in those ways.
Yeah, I don't know that I have a whole lot to add to that. I mean, that was pretty comprehensive. It is financial literacy. It's absolutely digital literacy. is that having access to technology, you be away for 2 years and come back and kind of try to use that phone to do something, and it's almost useless to it as quickly as technology changes. And one of the primary ones in my relationship with reentry was community, is that I needed a community to return to, and a supportive community to return to. And one of the components I think about that never gets considered, and especially if you've done, significant long-term time or even just consistent chronic time via incarceration or homelessness, is that recreation is a piece that is never considered as a vital part of like your life experience. And so often we're coming home from institutions after having been gone, either psychologically, if not physically, prior to institutions, and then all of the physical time that you're done, is that you come back from being down and you're making up for lost time. And so like I'm plugging into everything, trying to create some stability in my life situation and in my financial situation, and repair harms done in my family situation. And one of the things that we never think about, which is a really essential component of being a human being, is play. Like recreation is like, what do I do for peace or entertainment or connection or just fun, whether it's creatively or engagement. So often there's these ideas is that like drugs and alcohol are used for fun for a long time, and then they're used for relief. But not having anything to plug into outside of like, taking care of this critical life stuff, and like play and community are a huge component of coming home, in as well as like, just getting the base needs stuff done.
Fantastic. Excellent answers. Before we move on into the question, because I see that we have a few questions that individuals in the audience would like, I would just like to thank both of you for the excellent insight that you have provided this afternoon, the work that you do in the community. And you are definitely queens of our community, as well as ambassadors for individuals who have been through this experience, to let them know that, hey, change is possible, healing is possible. And once we get there, then this is what it looks like on this side. It's not going to be easy. There's going to be challenges, but there's people out here to be able to help us and support us in our walk. So let me do this. Let me kind of open this up for some of the questions. And I see Karen, I think is it Karen Snyder? Has her hand raised. I'm not sure if she has a question in the box, or would she like to make a comment? Karen, you're on mute. Okay. So let us go to the question box. Question number one, is there a focus finding housing that is accessible to resources for folks? Is there a focus finding housing that is accessible to resources for folks, like buses and even affordable food places? Does somebody want to, can you guys see these questions? Okay. So would somebody like to touch on that one? And I know for myself, being a person who developed transitional housing programs, supportive housing programs, I would do a survey of the area that the house was being opened. And as a person who assists other organizations in creating one, that would be the first thing that I talk about. How accessible is it to community resources? Are there buses near? Are there grocery stores near? Is there employment near? And I know people who have set up housing programs in areas where individuals have had to walk a mile just to catch a bus. That's when you look at housing people versus helping people. Because if an individual is having to jump through too many hoops just to be able to have access to essential need providers, then we understand that that person is going to have a harder struggle than some person who has a housing program that sits, like say in Skyway, where you have buses, you have two different major ports that individuals can go, as well as employment opportunities that surrounds them. Would either one of you like to answer this question?
I don't know that I could say it better than you did, Franklin. I mean, you know, I think that that's one of those questions is like, that like, is there a focus systemically? No, like that it's not part of the consideration that's made in handing out resources. So often our resources are handed out silo as though the need is independent. As an organization, yes. Like as an organization for Weld Seattle, yes. If your stomach is, if you're hungry, how do you work? How do you concentrate? How do you take care of your stuff? If you have to travel inordinate, kind of distances and, navigate in a bunch of territory trying to get stuff done, then it makes you less effective on the bus. And like that stuff impacts your, really frankly, like your morale or your ability to get have victories in a day. And it's like the simpler that you can make that and understand that that's its own ecosystem, is that like having access to transportation and food enables me to those are essential life things. But like systemically, I don't know that there's a focus on it.
Andrea?
I think I was thinking about a opportunity. We had a housing opportunity for some of our clients, and it was in Renton. And we went out to the site to check it out, and it had a couple restaurants, Starbucks right there in the neighborhood. But in order for them to get transportation, light rail hasn't been built yet out there. And so it says it wouldn't be ready till late 2023 or 2024. And the bus stop was a mile away. And the buses stopped running early in the evening, right? And so it just wasn't a good idea to put our clients in this area where they didn't have access. Sure, they could have worked at the Starbucks and then went right back to their place of housing, right? But if they ventured out, they would definitely be stuck. And we want to make sure that people have access where they're housed, because if you don't have access, then you feel like you're incarcerated again, like you don't have, you're stuck in this one little silo. And so we chose not to house people there because I wanted people to feel like they were free and had the freedom to move about and see and have the resources that they wanted, and not what was just in this one space, like they were just stuck. You could work in 2 or 3 of these places, 1 or 3 of these places, right? We want people to have access to be able to move. So in finding housing for individuals, I look for that. Otherwise, we're going to turn into a taxi service. So we're going to do a whole bunch of Ubers to make sure that people can get to where they want to go. So yeah, the freedom to be able to move about is important for individuals that are coming home, or for anyone.
Fantastic. Thank you both. Thank you both for that one. And then moving on to the next question. How do you see social housing as a way to improve the reentry for formerly incarcerated people? And if I may just start off this one, I see any type of social housing model that doesn't discriminate against individuals, that's not trying to exploit people, that operates off of a margin, an equitable margin based on income, where people can afford it, instead of creating such a hurdle for people to be able to get in, actually for 3 times the amount of the rent. And for somebody to be able to rent, when the fact of the matter is, most people, in my personal experience in doing property management and supportive housing, is the people who haven't had housing barriers, more so with employment, that you have to watch out for paying rent, and not somebody who has barriers because they already know that they've been given an opportunity. So they're not trying to blow the opportunity. But somebody who's never experienced it still have kind of an entitlement issue. And I have a lot of landlords that I work with that they'll tell me in a minute, we don't care that a person has a job. We want to see if they're going to be able to pay their rent. You have a track record paying rent, because they're finding out that people who have a job will stop paying rent, just like somebody who moved into a situation that they couldn't afford. So when we look at social, the model here under social housing, If it's a model that's based on equity, and one that looks at inclusion, that doesn't discriminate, offers all those ingredients that makes for harmonious, then yes, I definitely feel that that would be good for people coming not only out of incarceration, but for those people who are trying to transition from homelessness or some other form of hardship to where they would like to be. Would one of you guys like to give me some insight on that one as well?
I don't know how we could add to that, frankly. You just laid it out.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. I mean, I think the only thing that, well, I mean, it's all the things, because like, if we're talking about social housing, then we're talking about, we are limiting housing costs. And if I don't have to spend as much for my rent, then it means that I have more resources for my family, you know, like for food or healthcare or childcare, you know, any of those kinds of things. Some of the things that we don't take into consideration is like children having access to sports, and, you know, it's those kinds of things. So if we're in social housing and it gives the individual or the family more access to resource.
Okay, and then I mean, the last one that I see here, what are some employment benefits you would have appreciated to help with your transition after leaving jail or prison? So I'm not going to start off with this one. I'm going to let you guys start off and talk about what would some employment benefits that would have been helpful for you when you re-entered the community, versus that high hill or mountain that we have all had to climb just to get recognized or to get some type of employment opportunity.
The ones that come up for me is that having access to second chance employers, and having a voucher or stipend that was specifically for being able to buy work clothes, because so often we go to do an interview or you're coming from work release, and if you don't have resources, you're getting whatever in that work release closet, or whatever you can find, if you can get like a St. Vincent de Paul or something. But then, I mean, that was my story when I first came out, is that I didn't have the resources. And so I had to go get a voucher for somewhere so I could get some clothes so that I could even go do an interview. And then of course is that, like, coming out of the gate, I think it should be requisite that that everybody that's coming out of the gate should have somebody that walks them through their life experience. Because if you have huge gaps in your work history, we have transferable skills that we can absolutely talk about, so that we draft these resumes in such a way that highlight our strengths, so that we physically walk out of our place of employment, or I mean, out of the institution and into a place of employment, and be able to submit a resume to someplace to advocate for ourselves and what our strengths are. So those are the ones I think of.
Fantastic, fantastic. Andrea?
I didn't have a challenge in that way when I came home, because I started off with Community Passageways when I came home, which is a second chance employment opportunity org. And I was given a livable wage when I came home. So I was able to stay with my family when I came home. So I didn't have to come home and worry about paying rent immediately. Right. So I was able, because they gave me a nice wage, to be able to save money and then do the things that I needed to do. But it is definitely a challenge for some people who come home and they don't have that familial support, and they need opportunities for second chance opportunities, work opportunities from employers that will allow you to come and work and pay you for your work, right? And not just give you minimum wage because you have a record, or give you a lower wage because you have a record, but give you a livable wage, a living wage here, so that you can afford to take care of yourself, pay rent, buy, and like Carolyn said, oftentimes people don't have clothing when they come home, and you can find a couple of vouchers. There's orgs now, but I didn't know that they had reentry resources upon my release. And so it's great that it's here now for individuals that are coming home, that can help them with interview clothing. When you leave prison, they give you 2 outfits, one to wear out and one from their clothing closet, one interview outfit, you know, a pair of black pants and maybe a button-down shirt. But it is key to be able to have someone to help you, like Carolyn said, with a resume, so that if you don't have any job history, that you can use those transferable skills. And oftentimes those skills are very valuable in the workforce. And we don't know, a lot of people don't know how to use those transferable skills or how to word it. And so you're saying, I'm from Washington, I got these skills at Washington Correctional Center for Women, right? I can say that, and they can call and get a reference from me, and they don't have to say that she got these skills while she was incarcerated. They'll say, yes, she was employed. So just being able to have someone that walks you through that and give you that little nugget is important.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you both. Thank you both for your insight on that and sharing that one. I know myself, I mean, to go back to the one thing that I understand, and even doing the work that we do, it really just comes down to, we all hope for a better opportunity when we come out. I never was released from prison and turned around and said, told somebody, I'm going to see you when I come back. I've always had conversations with individuals about how we would be able to enjoy the reentry, how we'd be able to enjoy life once we come out. And that dynamic that you both just set up for the audience to understand, when we talked about in the beginning, there's two types of people that come out: those that are supported, those are not supported. The journey for the two is definitely going to be different, and it's going to be a little bit harder for one than it is for the other. But the one thing stands to a fact, and you guys are excellent examples of it, is that with the right type of pro-social support on your side, both can make it to the next phase and start to realize what it is that they would like to do. So one, I want to thank you and everybody that's in the space for taking your time out today and just listen and get some insights to some of the struggles that individuals that returning back to the community have to go through, especially in this conversation about housing. The last question I see here is basically, I mean, just really coming to this space and understanding the importance of establishing community cafes. And I'm sure, I know that Community Passageways as well as Weld all have areas that people can come and start having conversations about what reentry look like. And that's why I appreciate both of your programs, because of the fact that you are giving individuals the news they can use to have the hand up instead of looking for that handout. We know that there's people that's going to need a helping hand and those that just need a hand up. But at the same time, it's those people that are looking for the handout that we have to take to the side and say, hey, this is that time that we start to step up to the plate and do what's necessary for ourselves. Can people, let's see, what can people do to help build stronger infrastructures of community care when there is much entrenched, when there is so much entrenched in the current system that maintains such strong barriers? What can we or others in the community do that to help us spread this message, to unentrench a system that has been for so long just kind of dedicated to just keeping people suppressed? What would be some of your thoughts?
The best thing for me is to continue to show up in spaces like this and have these conversations and support this bill that's going out. But definitely having conversations that affordable housing is essential, right? And it is very necessary that people are able to one, have housing, to be housed, so that they're out of that survival mode, right? And that it is affordable. But having landlords and homeowners or whomever to give people opportunities.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Carolyn. I mean, mine, it mirrors what Andrea said. It mirrors it. Is that systems are made up of individuals. And it's that, like, no one was ever able to punish me into transformation or shame me into transformation. They could get compliance out of me, but it wouldn't change my heart. And systems are made up of individuals. And so we do this work and we have these conversations not so that we can bully somebody into doing what we want, but so we can change their hearts so that they change their minds. And is that we show up and we be examples of the thing that it is that we want to see, so that there's something to model.
And I appreciate both of you so much for sharing that. Bravo. My hat's off to both of you for the work that you do. I want to thank everybody from Yes on Initiative 135. Thank you for coming to the Lunch and Learning Housing After Incarceration, excuse me, and a part of the House Our Neighbors series. And with that, I will move it on over to Camille and let her close us out.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much to the panelists for such an amazing conversation, and I learned so much. I hope all of the attendees in the audience did as well. Just really quick updates on the campaign. We are on our last weekend of this 20-day period to signature gather. So I dropped a link in the chat for folks to sign up to volunteer with us this weekend. We are also working on stuff around the Seattle Comprehensive Plan to make sure that we zone for communities for all, so that everyone has access to 15-minute socially thought out communities. You can upvote our plan at the second link. And then finally, we have one more Lunch and Learn this summer on August 18th that will be featuring social housing movements from across the US in California and Hawaii and Maryland. So please join us for that. And thanks everyone for coming. Thank you, Franklyn, Carolyn, and Andrea so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Have a great afternoon all.
Bye.
Thank you. You guys be safe. Everybody be safe.